Hello everybody and welcome to your blended flipped hybrid learning lesson slash presentation in which you're going to take part in kind of a blended flipped hybrid learning opportunity to learn about blended flipped and hybrid learning. So to get started, first thing we are going to do is talk about what is, and we're going to tackle the term blended learning for starters. And this is kind of the big buzzword right now in education. Everything's all about blended learning. Everybody had a little blended learning component, or a lot of people anyway had a blended learning component in your professional growth plans. And to just kind of paraphrase this big long definition, it's where students learn partly from face-to-face interaction with the teacher and partly through an online or digital component. And the biggie that really makes the big thing that really defines the blended learning is the control over time, place, path, or pace. So when you're thinking about something, Khan Academy fits this bill because students are able to progress at different levels. And the big thing that makes blended learning is that it does take place at school. It's not completely online. It's not online school, and it's not complete face-to-face instruction with the teacher. It is a blend of both, hence the term blended learning. This is a common visual on some of the sites that explains blended learning. So we start first with, let me go back to that slide. So we start first with our brick and mortar school. That's what we are. Then there's the online learning. And when you kind of combine school with online learning, that's where we get our blended learning. And within it, there are 4 different models: the rotation, the flex, the a la carte, and the enriched virtual model. I'll tell you about each. The one that we are going to focus on mostly today is the rotation model, because that's the one that seems like it's the most applicable to a K through 8 setting. In the flex model, this is where the students would go to school, but it's completely flexible how much online learning they do. In some models, you may have an online class. In other models, you may have teachers that just kind of supervise students, and most of their learning is online. Maybe in a high school setting where the students are a little more independent, this model might work. But within a self-contained K through 5 classroom, for sure, this might be a little bit tricky to pull off. And even at the junior academy, where we're still working on just kind of, hey, how do we self-direct ourselves and stay engaged in something for more than 5 minutes at a time, this one seems a little tough. In the a la carte model, it would be a course that a student takes entirely online to accompany other courses or experiences that they're having at the brick and mortar school. So maybe you have a completely virtual Spanish class where you just go in the room, you throw the headphones on, and you are learning completely online. There's a teacher in there supervising, but that person does nothing to deliver the instruction. It's completely done online. And then maybe in your other classes, like your math class, it's complete face-to-face instruction. This is where you have the option of going to school and you're taking a class completely online. In the flex model, you have the flexibility of some of your class, part of your class, some classes, all classes, all have online components. Here, this is where one particular class or two are completely online, and then others are not. And in the enriched virtual model, this is where the majority of your learning is taking place online. You may come to school once a week or once a month to meet with a teacher, but the majority of your learning is happening online. And so when you're looking at this continuum, here, this involves the smallest amount of online learning, and over here, number 4, this involves the greatest and almost completely online learning. Now, we're going to take a little bit closer look at the rotation model. And this one, like I said, it seems to be the most easily implemented at the K through 8 level. This has 4 pieces to it. The station rotation model, and you're going to watch something in a little bit about a modified flip, which looks and sounds a whole lot like the station rotation. And this is one, when I taught math, that I kind of inadvertently stumbled upon and didn't realize that it was an actual thing. And this is where you have several stations set up in your class, and the students rotate throughout them, and one of the stations would contain some online learning. And the way I set that up is it wasn't necessarily online. Um, the one of the stations was just a lesson video. So instead of me teaching the whole class, I would have a lesson video where students could watch it, and the ones that understood it could kind of blow through it a little more quickly, and the ones where it wasn't making as much sense initially could stop, rewind, rewatch, slow down, and they could work through that lesson at their own speed. The other station I had set up, and this one has kind of that blended learning component, was, for instance, a Khan Academy station. And so the students would go there, and they were all at completely different places, and that was where they truly were controlling the path and the pace, because Khan Academy was doing all the differentiation for me. Other things like Front Row Math will do that. I believe KidBiz does some things like that. So that's the station rotation. The lab rotation, this looks a lot like the station rotation, except you are doing it by entire classes. So for instance, class A may be in the computer lab, and they're watching an online video or a recorded video, and they're getting all of their instruction completely online. Then they would then rotate to classroom B, where they would meet with a teacher, and maybe that teacher so in class A, maybe they're watching a video about some science lesson. Then they would rotate to class B, where they would do a lab that related to the video that they just watched, and then when they were done with that, they would maybe rotate to class C, where they would work on writing up their lab. But that's where entire classes are rotating through, not just little stations. The flipped classroom. We've also heard a lot about the flipped classroom, and we're going to talk about that a little more closely in just a minute. And lastly, the individual rotation is really similar to those first two, except instead of students moving through in groups or as classes, each student would kind of have their own menu. And so, for instance, student A might be prescribed by the teacher. The teacher might say, hey, I want you to go to stations 1, 3, and 4 today, and that's really going to help you work on what you need to work on. Then student B might need to go to stations 2, 3, and 5 so that they're getting exactly what they need. And this allows you to really custom tailor each student's experience so they're working on exactly what they need. Now, the flipped classroom. This is a biggie that we've heard a lot about, and a lot of you probably already know this, but basically what it means is instead of students doing the lecture at school, they go home, they watch a video, which would be the quote-unquote lecture part. Then when they come to school, instead of the teacher doing whole group instruction, the teacher is then free, assuming that they have all watched the video, the teacher is free to then work with small groups or individuals on kind of the homework part of it. The pros to it is that you can spend all of your class time working with small groups or individuals. The downside is that often students don't have devices, students don't have internet access, or students do not have the work ethic to actually do that at home. So and all of this, another term that's starting to surface is called hybrid learning, and again, it's really similar. It's basically another term for blended learning. It's just a mix of face-to-face online instruction. And again, when part of the instruction is happening online, that allows the teacher to then work with individuals or small groups. So, kind of the big picture is that in the grand scheme of things, nobody yet has come up with a perfect blended learning that works great for everybody all the time. There's not a one-size-fits-all magic pill that we can hand out to everybody where, hey, give this to your kids, do this, they're going to be absolutely brilliant, and you're going to be wildly successful. all of these are still pretty new. There's not a ton of data. Not too many people have been doing this on a big scale for a long time for people to really do research on it and determine how effective it is. However, some people have been doing it long enough where the data seems to suggest fairly strongly that if you take all things considered and you take a group of kids and they receive only face-to-face instruction, or you take a group of kids and they only receive online instruction, they learn at a certain level. But if you mix it up and you have a blend of some face-to-face instruction and some online learning, that seems to drive test scores up. So the initial data on these teaching methods does seem to be promising in that if you are able to get a successful mix of some face-to-face and some online, that it does really help. It does, at least initially, raise test scores. And lastly, one of the other big things out there right now are 21st century learning skills. President Obama has talked about these. It's a big push in education right now, too. And that basically involves the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And that's getting students, basically kind of preparing students for those 4 skills so that they can be successful in this 21st century workplace. And there's new methods continually being explored and refined, and more people are trying these out, and more people are finding, hey, this is a piece that worked, this is a piece that didn't work, this is something new I've added, and there's a ton of great resources out there. One kind of cool video, and we talked about this particular person called it the in-class flip. It, like I said, it sounds really similar to the station rotation, but I'm just going to hit play on the video so that you can check this out. And I think that this person does a nice job of illustrating and explaining station rotation or an in-class flip.
Hi, this is Jennifer Gonzalez for Cult of Pedagogy. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate a teaching configuration called the in-class flip. The pattern for a traditional flipped classroom goes like this. Instead of using lots of valuable class time delivering content to students, then having students apply that learning at home, you flip that arrangement, pre-recording the direct instruction and having students watch it at home, then doing the application part, what we typically think of as homework, in class. This arrangement is great when all your students have good home access to technology, but if they don't, the flip can fall apart. And access isn't the only problem. Some homes aren't conducive to the kind of learning that a traditional flip requires. Although districts are working on creative solutions to address these challenges, an in-class flip provides another alternative. Whereas a traditional flip depends heavily on things going right at home, the in-class flip keeps all parts of the flip at school, thus assuring that more students get the benefits of the flipped concept. Here's how it works. Suppose you teach Spanish. This week, you're ready to introduce the difference between the verbs ser and estar. So, just like in a regular flipped classroom, you record a short lecture on this concept. Now, instead of having students watch this video at home, the video becomes one station in your class. So suppose you have about 6 devices in your classroom for this kind of station. That takes care of one group of 6. If you have 30 students, we need good quality stations for the rest of them. Since this is a foreign language class, another station can be a memory game, using vocabulary that's already been learned, along with a few new words and a dictionary to look them up. That takes care of 6 more students. Notice that this is a game that can be played over and over. It's good to have a few stations like this, since others may require students to go longer than planned, and an infinite station like this one can absorb some of that extra time without students getting antsy. In another station, students could work in pairs, reading a skit that makes heavy use of the verbs ser and estar. For students who have already watched the video, this will reinforce what they learned. For those who have not, it'll act as an anticipatory set, building curiosity about those 2 words. Just like with the previous station, this activity can be done over and over if needed. Students can switch partners or roles if they get restless. Another station could be a standalone activity, like a cultural or craft lesson, like making cascarones. It's important that activities like this be quick and simple, taking no more time than any other station. Do one yourself ahead of time to estimate the duration. Another station could be a basket of clothes and household objects, along with a set of cards that give Spanish instructions for dressing up and acting out short scenarios. So where is the teacher all this time? This is what makes this a flip rather than just station work. Because the teacher has pre-recorded the lecture portion of the lesson, he is now free to interact with students at the other stations, correcting their misconceptions, answering any questions they might have, but never having to re-deliver the lesson itself. So right now, you'd have exactly the right number of stations for your students. But notice that none of these really builds on the learning that took place in the video station. And if you've ever done stations before, you know that it helps a lot to have at least one extra station to keep things from backing up. So let's add one more. This one will have focused written work that builds on the material learned in the viewing station. Notice that right now this is left empty. Because students need to watch the video before doing this station, it should be left empty in the first round. To help organize things, go ahead and number your stations. Notice that I made the empty station last and the video viewing station second to last. So get students started at their first station, and after a set amount of time, have them rotate to the next station. Once students start rotating here to station 6, this is where you'll spend most of your time to make sure the concepts from the video are being applied correctly. So the rotation would continue in this direction. As students move through the station, some irregularities may develop. One student will need to repeat the video, or a late arriving student will need to be worked into the rotation. Stations are ideal for this kind of differentiation as long as you plan for it. To keep things running smoothly, have a final independent activity, like silent reading, for students to do when they're completely finished with all stations. Or assign leadership roles for students who finish quickly, the dealer at the card game, the scenario reader at the dress-up station, or an assistant at the cascarone table. If you teach in a self-contained classroom or have extended class periods, an in-class flip could take place in one day, maybe taking about 90 minutes or so, depending on the kind and number of stations you set up. If you teach many groups in shorter periods of time, keep your stations set up over a few days or even a week, with the goal that students will finish them all by the end of a set period of time. I hope the in-class flip offers you a new option for using technology in your teaching. Thanks for watching and have a great day.
All right, what you are going to do now is I have shared with you that link page, and on that link page is a list of resources by Academy, and I would encourage you to either get together with your grade level team, your house team, or if you want, you can completely mix it up and work with people in other grade levels. But this is an opportunity for you the rest of the time here are just some options. You could share things that you're already doing. I know there's lots of people doing lots of great things with blended learning, and this is a chance to hear about some of those and maybe spark some ideas. You could hop online. I gave you a couple of basic resources. The PDF has loads of them. You could spend hours looking at all of them. You could start checking some of those out. You could just go off on your own with a partner and start looking up different resources, doing an internet search. The idea is on that resource page is if you find something or if you're already doing something, to add to it. Everybody has access to it, and so as we add resources, everybody is going to have access to it, so you will have hopefully a really robust resource document where down the road, if you want to try something, you can check that out, and there should be all sorts of great ideas of things that you could try. And Harold and I will be walking around and we'll be visiting with groups, and if at any point you have a question, please ask. And lastly, in closing, after you've done a bunch of research and learning about blended learning, I am absolutely happy to teach a component or a blended learning lesson to your class. Happy to help you set up for a blended learning lesson. Happy to help you plan. Happy to just be in the room to help or just be observed and share ideas. All you have to do is call or email. And with that, if you're just doing some sort of a project and you're looking to add a tech component or you have a tech component, just ask. We have tons of ideas. We would be more than happy to help. So get together with a colleague or 3 or 4 and spend some time either planning or sharing ideas or researching something to do with blended learning. Thank you.